You're listening to the Accordion podcast with Veronique Medrano. Hi, I'm Veronique, and on this week's episode, we get to chat with filmmaker and entrepreneur Adrian Arredondo. This South Texas artist and filmmaker has worked alongside well-known artists such as Zoey Saldana, Maluma, Anita, and Ivy Queen, and led global music programs at Spotify, the programs that you may know, Viva Latino and Loud, the History of Reggaeton podcast. Now he's working on a special project, Take It Away, a documentary focused on the life and impact of Johnny Canales. So without further ado, let's take it away with Adrian Arredondo. This podcast is sponsored by Cricket Wireless. I recently made the switch to Cricket, and they removed the extra hassle of staying connected and calling within the US and Mexico. And trust me, that is always an issue with every other service provider except for Cricket. Make the switch and join the Cricket comunidad with me, Veronique. And if you think that's too good to be true, then download the Try Cricket app from the App Store to start your free trial of nationwide 5G that covers 99% of folks in the US. It's just one reason why people who come to Cricket stay with Cricket.
One trial per person, 5 people per home address. An unlocked GSM-compatible smartphone is required. Cricket 5G requires a compatible device and is not available everywhere. For 5G coverage, see cricketwireless.com/map for more details.
Thank you so much for coming, Adrian. I know, like we've been working. We've been doing a lot.
This is
we've been chit-chatting. We've been working. We were in this space.
I'm in this space. We have been working together for what, like 2 months now?
Yeah, we've been working together.
Oh, we just
for 2
met
months.
today.
Yes, we met in person today.
Yeah, this has been amazing.
So it's nice to kind of go from being internet. I always say, like, my internet friends. My internet friends. And going from being on the internet and communicating that way to in person. And so how many times does that happen to you where you're having to communicate with people a lot, like over the phone or online, and then you meet them in person and you're like,
I think it happens. It's been happening a lot more often. I think the more that I assume the route of executive producer, especially now that I'm on the more entrepreneurial route, I really am taking a lot of onus on relationship building. And something that I talk to my therapist a lot is this idea of trying to like reach the unreachable, but also being really receptive to what's trying to reach you. Mm-hmm. So I think I used to maybe be a little bit standoffish at times in my past because I was so focused on my one project or my vision, or like feeling like my voice is present in something. But now I don't really worry about those things. I worry more about empowering others and listening to who wants to be a part of my journey and allowing that, and also just being a little bit more chill, honestly. I love internet friends. And so, we met on Instagram. We connected creatively over a lot of the music, and are passionate about Tejano music specifically.
Yes.
And we're both from the Valley. I'm from McAllen. So
I'm from Bronzeville.
Yeah. So whenever I meet creative people such as yourself from the Valley, I will always respond. I will always say yes.
Oh my God. That makes me so happy, because there's this sentiment, unfortunately, with like Valley creatives, that there's a lot of competition. And I get it, because there's not a lot of stuff that you can get here. A good example is I got a Broadway audition for Real Women Have Curves, the musical. And I was like, wow, when I spoke to the casting director, who's out of LA, I was like, I told him straight up, I said, these are not opportunities that I would get. Mm-hmm. And the reason I wouldn't get them is because I literally live in a town that doesn't have the infrastructure to support castings from New York to other places. Like it's a New York production, but they go to big cities to cast. And my city is small. Like my area is growing. Mm-hmm. I mean, we can both say it. Like you're coming back here in McAllen and you see it, and it's grown, but it's still not a mecca for like culture and the arts. And a lot of the times when you get the opportunity, you just go and you strike for it. And so you're currently, moving around. You're in LA, you're in Miami, and how would you kind of describe why it is that you have that mentality of, putting it forward? Because that's what it is.
Absolutely. So I was born in Reynosa, just down the street.
Literally.
Yeah.
some way from the
it's like
studio.
you go down the street, you like cross a little river, and that like there's my grandma, you know. And but I was raised mostly in McAllen. Went to high school right down the street from here, Nicky Row. I haven't been back in a few years, and just driving to your studio, I got pretty emotional driving past my high school. I almost cried because I had this feeling of, I remembered when I was a teenager, feeling exactly what you're describing. It felt impossible to escape that like hand of the valley to these major markets like New York, LA, Miami. And I knew when I was 15, 16, 17 that I wanted to be a visual artist, a filmmaker, but I didn't know how. I didn't know a single person that did that. There was no directors in McAllen. There was no creative entrepreneurs that were trying to get TV shows off the ground or cast.
Like here.
Yeah,
here. Like that's not a market. Like the market here
doesn't exist.
Is agriculture.
Yes.
The market here is like oil. Like the market here is so many other like engineering, technical, really like farm. Like there's so many other careers, just not
shipping.
This.
And a lot of here there's so much that deals with international trade of goods and services, and like you know, my family works in that business. My mom works in you know, trade of goods and services between Texas and Mexico, and you know, my dad always worked from McAllen, but for companies in other states. And so growing up, I always felt like there wasn't a ton of opportunity for the creative endeavors here. I ended up going to film school at UT Austin, and it wasn't until really I got to college that I was like awoken to the larger creative industry in the United States. And it felt competitive there because I think I was surrounded by so many people that were not from the Valley. And I, you know, obviously had to compete in school to kind of rise above. And after I graduated from college, I moved to New York City to pursue filmmaking, to become a director. And after living in New York for 5 years, then moving to LA for about 5 years, moving to Miami for 2 years, now my perspective is completely different. And you're right, there's a ton of competition, but now I believe that there is enough to go around, and I don't feel like I'm competing against anybody but myself. I have my head down, I focus on what it is that I know, and that is border culture, that is like this very unique immigrant experience as a Mexican American. And I fortunately have worked for amazing companies, worked with global artists, and I see now that one of the few takeaways that I've like really hold true is that you shouldn't try to compete against anybody but yourself, and you really just need to focus on your individual voice. And nobody else has my voice, nobody else has your voice, and no one else can compete. You know, you do you. And so now I try to help others do that because others have helped me in my path.
It's interesting to point that out because of the fact that we look at the machine that is the entertainment industry. And I say that like on all levels, whether it's film, whether it's TV, whether it's singing, whether it's whatever, like even painting. A lot of the times there's the machine itself, the machine of entertainment. And I say the machine because it's not the thing that creates, it's the thing that makes the money from the creators, always tries to pit people against each other, pit creators against each other, pit ethnicities against each other in a way that just continues that mindset of competition. Like, oh, there's only one spot for this one person because there's only one place. Like it feels like the oxygen as you go up and you climb up the mountain gets less and less, but really let's put science aside because that is existing and that's true. But in the machine of entertainment, that's not true. Like our perception of climbing up doesn't require us to lose like creators and creatives.
Moving up doesn't require you to isolate yourself, and it doesn't require you to deny others opportunities. It's kind of the opposite. Like I feel like there's definitely some people will make you feel that or make you think that. Even
certain communities of people will make you feel that.
And especially if you're, for example, when I moved to New York, you know, when I was in my early 20s by myself, I didn't know anybody in New York, and I felt like I was competing against the world. And that's kind of scary, but quickly you realize, I'm just a unique individual, just like all the other millions of people here. Maybe that makes you a little sad because there's a tinge of loneliness to that, but also there's so much opportunity, and recognizing, looking behind you and seeing your own, you know, in this point, like your own demographic, your own market, your own audience, as something that is waiting for you to like give them something to open up, to talk to. And like you said, there wasn't a ton of opportunities here. And now after a decade of going around the United States and working in media and entertainment, I see that people from the Valley are not often spoken to with the level of, I don't want to say respect, even though there's a lot of that.
I think there's some of that, some love,
but there's not a ton of investment in our stories.
Yeah.
And I'm from here. I'm at the point where I can invest, you know, finally back into the stories of our communities, and nothing makes me happier than finding my creativity back, you know, in places that feel true to me.
It was really cool because we were talking off camera about our mutual experience, except you leaned really heavy into film, mm-hmm. and I leaned really heavy into music and writing. Mm-hmm. And that, like, we were both in Skills USA. We both competed in yes. media tech. Or I don't know if that's what it was called, but I called it that. Uh-huh. You know, media tech. And how did that set you up for success? How did doing that in high school set you up for success to be able to compete at a larger level in Austin? Because Austin is now moving from fish pond, mm-hmm. fish lake, or maybe ocean. I mean, I'll say lake, because New York was definitely ocean.
Lake Austin.
Lake Austin.
During the drought, you know? For sure.
Yeah.
That's a good question. So here in McAllen in South Texas, it definitely feels like a smaller pond. Then you move to Austin and it's a lake, you know, and then you move to New York and it's like the ocean, and then you move to like LA and it's I don't even know what, some type of like monsoon like yes. situation. You're like on an island. But it did start for me in high school. Yeah. So to just answer your question, so when I was in high school, when I was a junior, I joined a class called KMAC. Mm-hmm. Here, it's a program that I don't know if it's expanded beyond McAllen, but the three high schools here, you know, send a group of students to Mac High to learn basic techniques and skills when it comes to media. You learn how to shoot basic cameras, you learn how to edit, you learn how to, you know, write a script, how to talk on camera, you learn how to like plug in a microphone, just the basics. Mm-hmm. But those basics over the course of 2 years took me so far. I just really involved myself. I also just naturally, I think, like to, I don't say go above and beyond, but I like to use the tools at my disposal to try to create new things and experiences. So when I was a junior and a senior, I competed at Skills USA, at STN. At the time, the STN was in Los Angeles, and that was the first time I had ever gone to LA. It was the first time I really had ever left Texas. I never had traveled. And I was 17, I was 18, I went to LA to compete internationally against all the high schools in the United States. And one year, my very first year, I placed second place in the country for music video competition. And then my second year, I think I placed third place for a PSA competition. So one was very creative and musical, and the other one was more, I would call it more advertising, a little bit more marketing. Mm-hmm. And then it comes time to go to college, and I already have my mind made up. I want to go to film school. I want to be a filmmaker. But I didn't quite have maybe the grades or just like the what I needed to get into some of the schools, but I had an amazing reel. I had more work as a high school student than just about anyone in Texas. So I sent that to the University of Texas with the help of my KMAC teacher straight to the dean, and they gave me special admission. They accepted me on some special case basis. And and then once I got to UT, I felt like I was somehow way behind all the other students. And I think that's just the mentality of coming from the Valley and just always feeling like you're behind and like you're like maybe not good enough. Mm-hmm. And so when I got to Austin, I was hyper competitive. And then I got really focused. Then my grades were amazing. Then I was like on my shit. And I did pretty well in college as well. Started making films, started making friends. I started working for the university's film program. I started meeting all of the graduate film directors. And then by the time I was a senior, I had a short film that was playing at the Cannes Film Festival in France. And I went out there for that. I actually missed my college graduation so that I could be at the Cannes Film Festival to represent.
I'm sorry, I would do that too. I actually didn't go to my master's graduation because I was doing a gig and I said no.
Yeah.
That was more important to me. Like being out there and doing the thing was more important than going and walking and sitting in a chair and walking on a stage and being like, oh yeah.
Well, you know what's crazy is that I remember having a conversation with my parents about it because I have two brothers. You know, my older brother went to college, my younger brother went to school, but they went to school out of state. I was, I think, the only one of their children that went to school here in state, and they could actually go to the graduation ceremony, you know, from UT. And I remember I had a conversation with them, and I was like, I don't think I'm gonna go to my college graduation because I have this opportunity, but I feel pretty guilty because I want you guys to experience, you know, watching your son and all because, you know, obviously my parents got me there. They helped me. They taught me everything.
Just put your brother in your outfit and then have him walk.
I should have done that, right? But it was like a moral dilemma that I had, and I talked to my parents, and they were like, "Go to the festival, you know, do that." And then so I go to the festival, and I had an amazing experience. And from there, once I saw the global nature of filmmaking when I was 21, I was like, this is what I'm gonna do. And that completely opened my eyes to what was necessary to be the best. And I came back to Texas and I was like, I'm moving to New York City.
Okay.
You know? And
what does it take to be the best in film?
I mean, I don't think it takes moving to New York City. I think, you know, I did that.
That was a choice.
It was a choice, and it clearly did a lot for me. But I think to be the best in filmmaking, you have to follow your intuition, and you have to tell stories that are truthful, and you have to recognize where your voice is, and you know, you have to find what's unique about you. What can you do that nobody else can do? And not to say you have to reinvent the wheel, but you do have to speak from a vulnerable place. You have to be honest, and you have to be creative.
Like, vulnerability is so hard, and even for myself, and that's something so weird to say as somebody who's a singer, because my vulnerability doesn't always come from my songwriting. It hasn't previously, because you have to really open yourself up to critique about your own life experiences, and that's really hard. And for creatives, like, let's just say the money isn't there, and, you know, all these other things aren't there, and maybe you're not making millions and millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars,
or not even $100.
But if you can be vulnerable, there's so much more impact that you can make. And so, given that vulnerability, what other aspects of your life do you feel that you keep to yourself, that you keep as just something for you, where it's not so tied to the making of art, that it's more tied to just you being happy?
Me being happy. Like, what's the vulnerable side of me that makes me happy? Vulnerable that makes me happy. I love connecting with people on a familial level. So usually, and a lot of my work kind of goes in this direction. I love to talk to people about their parents and about where they come from and about their lineage and their history. And I just love history. Generally, a lot of what I do revolves around music history and also recontextualizing history and just trying to make things very digestible and easily understood. And, you know, we were talking about off camera right before this interview about something I love about filmmaking is that you get to show things, you don't have to explain things. And there's a lot of opportunity there. So, you know, there are ways to represent vulnerability without having to necessarily say it. And that's something that I really love about visual arts. And
same. Yeah. I think that's why I always gravitated to film and TV, because there were so many ways that even as a viewer, I go, man, like, I'm letting myself go, and I am ingesting and kind of philosophizing, you know, a scene or something in my own frame of reference, because they're not trying to reach me, they're trying to reach everyone. But the point of reaching everyone is that it gives you enough room to have the conversation, to have the dialogue with yourself and with others when you talk about a show or a film, and what it meant, what a certain scene meant, what a certain moment meant. the Easter egging of film is interesting.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes it removes let everybody have their own opinion. Let everyone kind of deal with a scene or a moment in their own way.
Absolutely.
Versus Easter egging really goes, oh no, this is what they meant. It was just this, or this, that, like referencing, and to such a point that it kind of removes that agency that the film gives every person that watches it, or
Completely.
every TV show.
And it's interesting. I've had different iterations of my career depending on the job I've worked for, the agency or the company or the city, or the things that come my way that I'll say yes or no to just because it sounds like, oh, that pays well, or like, oh, there's like a celeb, like whatever gets you excited,
Mm-hmm.
I've tried a lot of things, but I can honestly say that the more things I've tried, the more I go back to what is real and vulnerable for me. And I've directed music videos and films and podcasts and all of these narratives, but what always feels the most honest is when I can talk to people about culture and music and history. And now I tend to focus a lot of my efforts in that space.
I can definitely see that in your previous work, especially like the things that did the biggest were the things that hit that exact tone, where it was hitting all those marks that you just put out.
Yeah.
There was a checklist. They would be here and it would be like check,
and
check,
I
check.
think that's because I grew up in the Valley, right? And like my parents immigrated to Texas from Mexico, and there's that family history and that longing of like my past and my DNA, and it's in my blood. And I grew up playing music, and I'm not a musician now, but like that was my first form of art that I was open to here at De Leon, playing band and marching band and guitar lessons at Hermes and things like that. And and then filmmaking, photography, painting, all of that kind of came later in my life, but it was all informed by my upbringing here.
What was your favorite movie as a kid?
Oh man, I had a lot.
Like the first one you think of?
The first one I think of, Amores Perros, or what's that Gael Garcia Bernal movie where he plays Che Guevara and he's like Motorcycle Diaries. Motorcycle Diaries is a film about history.
Yeah.
It's based off of the journals of a young Che Guevara before he becomes a revolutionary, and it's he's traversing Latin America, and he's meeting tons of people that are just living their lives, and he's sort of trying to understand why they don't have more, and what he can do about it. And he's just jotting his notes, and I don't know. And Gael Garcia Bernal at the time was like the actor, and it's just a beautiful movie. I really liked it.
Yeah, but the fact that it took from some of those films in like the 90s and 2000s, and that it would take, I would say it's taken a while for all of those actors who were working then to now, like literally barely now in like 2018. Well, I'll say 2018 just to be nice, because I don't know how long, but almost 18 years-ish, give or take, for most of those actors to now have steady careers in the American Western market, to me is such a disservice. Like I look at a lot of those actors, and like I said, I was at this festival and I saw the guy who was like, he was in Suicide Squad, James Gunn's Suicide Squad, as like a commander. And he was the lead. Yeah, like you remember his face? Well, he was the lead in the movie that was being shown at this film. And I'm like, I'm mad. Like I was like, not mad at the movie. The movie was great. It was hilarious. It was about a dad who was a con artist who was teaching his daughter how to be a con artist, and they were con artists together, and like they conned each other. It was so funny. It was a twist. It was funny. Oh my God, it was so good. But I was upset at the end, like when we're, having dinner afterwards, because I was like, this nuance of his acting is gorgeous. Like he's playing a dad, but he's a drunk, but he's really charming. Like there's so many layers and complexity to him, but yet you look at how they treat him in the American market, and they just made him a comandante that's of some South American,
a trope.
A trope. And I was like, man, that really sucks. Like you suck out all of the nuance. Of course, it's a DC movie, so I'm not gonna be like, I want nuance. I want nuance in a pop culture movie. Yeah,
of course.
Like that's not always gonna happen. So when it comes to that, and you're talking about culture, and I'm bringing this back around, you're talking about culture, and you're talking about the voice of the culture here. Why did it take this story? Or is there another story? Or have there been other stories that you've kind of had in the tuck in your brain that really said, okay, like this is what I need to do now? Because you went to New York and you did the things that you did. Mm-hmm. And then at some point, when was the turning point of I now understand my voice in culture?
I think it was when I met Zoey Saldana and when I became her creative director. Prior to doing that, she was interviewing people all over the country. And I was one of the selected, to interview for this role of creative director for Zoey Saldana, to start a new company that would be creating original films for a Latinx, North American, bilingual audience. And at the time, before doing that, I was directing a ton of amazing projects. I was doing projects for Google and like MasterCard, and I was doing music videos, but nothing that really resonated with like my vulnerability and authenticity, right? It didn't have anything to do with my culture, outside of maybe music videos, because those were artists that I really love to work with. But I didn't have a company that was like, Adrian, we value you for your experience as a Mexican-American immigrant from the Valley who can also communicate to people south of the United States, in Europe, in Asia, in China. Nobody was looking at me like that, but Zoey did. And once we started having these conversations, she really mentored me a lot. And it talked to me a lot of the power of individuality and the voice of Latinos, and also how successful you can be. She kind of, there's no limit to her success. She's one of the most successful people in the world. And once she empowered me to really find my own authentic, vulnerable voice, I never went back. And she also really challenged me to be like a mission-driven creative, and that also I never went back to. And it's true, once I started connecting with my roots and my voice, I can't make work that doesn't feed that. It doesn't feel true. And whenever I get offers for jobs or opportunities to direct something that doesn't resonate with me in that way, thank you. I think there's other people that would benefit from this opportunity more than me. I don't think I'm the best person for the job. And that's also what I mean when I say there's enough to go around. I'm only good for some things. You're probably better at so many more things than I am, but we're all unique individuals, right? Mm-hmm. And so I was 27 when I started doing that. And since then, I haven't gone back.
I love the fact that you say, there's a sense of a mission, and it's like if it doesn't feel like it feeds that, then it's like the plant, like Seymour, feed me.
Yeah,
like that's what it is. It's a flower, maybe not a carnivorous plant, but it's a flower that's blooming within you, and you're continuing to feed it what it needs and what it asks and requires, so that you can continue to create great work. Now, working on and working with these big name artists, you were saying that like the through line is something like you have to do what's good for you and what's good for your voice. And so when you work with these big artists, what do you feel is the thing that you continue to just constantly see as the message that almost life is giving you every time you work with another big name?
We're all on the same path. We all want the same thing ultimately, and that is to be seen, to be heard, and to connect with people that are looking for like a connection. And for me, it keeps going back to my Latin heritage and my want to empower other, especially young Latinos, to see that art is a viable path in your life. Media, filmmaking, podcasting, creating original experiences, starting businesses, you can do that. I thought it was impossible until someone helped me realize that it wasn't. Now I see it so clearly. My perspective has completely shifted, and my mission across everything I do is to help others sort of recognize that too, And so with Loud, the History of Reggaeton, with that podcast, I got to travel all over Latin America, a ton of Latin countries.
How did that change your perspective of Latin America?
Well, I've been to just about every Latin country at this point for a shoot or for an interview or for travel. And, you know, before I used to go to Europe a lot to learn, to visit. And now I love going to Latin America. It's my favorite place in the world. Mexico, Colombia, Peru, Argentina, Costa Rica, Panama, Puerto Rico, you know, New York, Miami. There's so much talent, so much passion, and I just think that there's a white space for Latinos to come up, and especially in North America right now, the demographic and like the money is finally starting to lean into our favor. So I think it's a good time to learn and absorb and just be in that space.
So the no saboness of the world.
No saboness. So I think no saboness goes on a spectrum, you know, from
the spectrum of no sabo. Wow, I'm here for this. No, go. I'm here. I'm gonna put a whole graphic.
No one's. I don't think anyone speaks any language perfectly, right? But
absolutely not. I don't even speak English perfectly.
No, nobody does. But one of the most beautiful things about English is that, you know, and I feel like I can say this because it's not my first language, but the thing I love the most about English is that you can make up any word at any time, and usually somehow it's understood by just about everyone in the room. You can make up a word on the spot, and it's so flexible, right? Spanish, I don't think is as forgiving, but growing up, I spoke a lot of Spanish, lost my Spanish a bit, you know, go to Austin, speak it even less, go to New York, speak it even less. Then I moved to LA, speak Spanish regularly, moved to Miami, and now it's all that I speak.
Okay.
But
that is a spectrum of an experience, because mine was, I spoke Spanish. I didn't speak till I was 4 or 5. And my mom told you. I didn't speak till I was 4 or 5. And then because I was in a bilingual home, like my grandmother was speaking to me in Spanish, my mom was speaking to me in Spanish and English. So like both of their theories is that like there was too much going on in my brain. Me, I don't know what the hell was going on up there, but when I finally figured it out, I was ingesting a lot of Spanish media, Mariela del Barrio, like all the novelas and just the TV and everything. And so I started to speak Spanish. But once you go into school, they really try to take it out of you. Like when you go to school, they try to wipe it from you.
You know something that I learned, and that ultimately gave me the confidence to just not care or give a fuck, is when I started working for Spotify and I started interviewing artists like Maluma, like Anita, like Mike Towers, like Quevedo, global #1 artists in the world, right? People that I think had I interviewed them years before would have scared me or intimidated me. But I go into every interview and the first thing that I say, you know, imagine you're Maluma, you're right there.
I am Maluma.
Yeah. And it's like intimidating, you know, at times, but I say, me llamo Adrian, hablo español, pero mi español no es perfecto. Y tengo que pensar antes de que digo algo. Entonces, voy a hablar un poquito más despacio, pero entiendo perfectamente. Entonces, espero que te sientas cómodo. Y tengo mis preguntas aquí. Y ahora vamos a empezar. And then I say,
okay.
But I also speak English if there's anything you want to say. And they always go, thank you for letting me know. And me opening up with that vulnerability immediately diffuses. And they're like, thanks, man, I appreciate it.
You're trying.
Of course.
Like that,
entiendo perfectamente. Puedo hablar completamente, pero un poquito más despacio y no tengo todas las palabras, pero es okay. Porque luego les pregunto, ¿hablas inglés? Oh, I speak a little English. Oh, I don't speak that much English. And it's like, we're all the same. It's like,
yeah,
we're all the same. We're all no sabo. It doesn't matter if you're from the United States or from Mexico or from Colombia.
No sabo.
Everyone's no sabo. No one speaks any language perfectly. If you speak Spanish perfectly, your English is going to likely suffer a little bit. If you speak English perfectly, your Spanish is likely going to suffer a little.
Like whatever your dominant language is, more often than not, the other languages suffer just a good bit, like within it. And like for me, I was just thinking about that. Like we are all no sabo. All of us are no sabo.
It's a spectrum of no sabo. And I just don't even trip about it anymore. I love it, and I feel like it's very endearing. And I think it diffuses, and back to that vulnerability, it lets, when you're honest with someone about your intentions and about like who you are, immediately they're there for you.
Para mí es tan importante que enseño, que nosotros hablamos los dos lenguajes. and I can immediately switch into English, and you know exactly what I'm saying. Y puedo cambiar a español y todavía estamos teniendo la misma conversación. Y yo aquí como loca, hablando tantito rápido, pero ahí voy yo.
Vamos a repetir toda la entrevista en español.
Sí,
ahorita.
toda la entrevista en español. Pam, pam. Tan, tan. Like, that's my catchphrase.
Tan, tan.
Tan, tan. And it's just understanding that and understanding the code switching. That's what it is. It's like understanding the code switching, understanding that everyone is a no sabo kid, and that the no sabo-ness is a spectrum. You're totally correct. I never thought about it that way. That each of us are no sabo in different languages, especially when we're trying to culturally relate. And that's just crazy. Like, just to think about it, that it's so ingrained in what happens with us.
There's nothing more endearing than someone trying, and especially someone trying to honestly connect with you.
Yes.
And it's like, yeah, maybe there's an accent or they don't remember some words, but if someone's looking you in the eye and they're trying to speak your tongue, you're gonna like that.
Yeah. I think that is a unique experience to being from the Valley, personally.
I think so too.
That being a spectrum of no sabo is us fighting against just assimilation that just doesn't take here.
Yeah.
That doesn't take at all. And understanding that and being cognizant of it, any border town, because there's a lot of border areas and they all have some through lines. And that through line is there's a lot of no sabo within our border communities, and within the communities that the further you get away from the border, the less you like speak the language.
And a lot of it too depends on your age of when you immigrated. For example, like my family immigrated to Texas when I was 4 or 5 years old. So I was speaking only Spanish up until I was 4 or 5, and then I changed. I was in first grade. When I went to first grade, I didn't speak any English. By the time I was in 5th grade, I spoke a little English. By the time I was in 8th grade, English was perfect. I was in AP writing classes, but it took me 10 years to like master the language. But over learning that, of course, I wasn't writing in AP Spanish. That class wasn't in my high school. So my English far outweighed my Spanish. Had I just been 15 minutes south in Reynosa, my Spanish would have flourished way faster than my English,
I love what you're bringing up, because I have always wondered from somebody, because I was, English eventually dominant by 2nd grade, because it scared me. I literally got scared into dropping Spanish altogether. And I was going to a private school. So like, they were like, oh, we'll keep you behind. And that to me held so many more problems in my mind, because I go, like, even though I didn't understand the concept of money, I did understand that it would affect my family in a bad way if I stayed behind, and that it was almost like a mark on my character and the mark on me as a person. And then when I finally went into public school in high school, it wasn't until and this is so weird of a time jump, but like you're 15 and you're there and you see the kids in ESL and you see how they're teaching them, and you're kind of confused, and it's almost like arm's length
the separation.
You're like, And then I was 25 and something happened. I was talking to somebody and I was like, what is the experience of ESL? What is the experience of English second language that almost feels like it others people to such a degree that it almost feels like, again, a mark on your character, that you can't learn English exactly perfectly the way these teachers want you to?
I mean, I was with the same group of kids from first grade, basically all the way to 8th grade. It was like a group of 25 of us. And so I felt comfortable. I felt comfortable because, I was in my classroom of like 25 people, and we all learned how to speak English together. And yeah, there were different levels to it, but I always felt pretty comfortable. I wasn't outside of that group, so it's hard for me to step into your shoes. But
that's interesting. It's like, it's just that group. It's just those 25 people. Like, yeah, like there's of course other ESL groups that are probably like bigger, smaller, whatever. But it was a community within yourselves, and you guys figured out how to make friends within yourself. But did you ever at any point, did it dawn on you that separation as you got older, that there was a separation because of your language acquisition?
A separation? I never thought about it like that. I never felt like I was separated or like less. Like I never felt like I was any less than, or like my opportunities were less. I feel like maybe that's just a personal thing. I've always just kind of been on my own lane and about my own thing. You know,
Yeah.
I try not to worry about others so much. Compare myself, and even in school, I did all right. So I was.
Because that's so interesting. I don't understand the experience of ESL, but like it just dawned on me that there was a separation. There was people that I didn't get to talk to, that if they had just let them be with people who spoke English and a little bit of Spanish and had that at home, how much the environment would be different, because you're almost creating like just a different ecosystem that doesn't separate like these 25 people to this kind of class.
Yeah.
Like that kind of like language learning class.
I don't even know if I was in ESL. I don't know how. I was in a GT class. Do you remember GT?
Yes, I remember GT.
My class was
Like gifted and talented. Yeah, the
Yeah.
gifted and talented class.
I was in that since first grade all the way through like till I finished school. And I don't know if it was an ESL, but I know that nobody spoke English. But they never called us ESL. They called us GT. So I was always like, okay, I guess I'm doing okay. You know?
Well, hey, then there, that's good. Early in 2020, I was in an accident, and the consequences I was living with afterwards was a lot to handle all at once. So if you're like me and trying to recover while trying not to lose your car, lose work and therefore money, and super injured, and have a huge growing stack of hospital bills to pay, then you need a professional to get the care you need. In case of an accident, you need a lawyer to protect your rights and your wallet. And honestly, you don't have to look any further than that simple phrase by going to incaseofanaccident.com or encasodeaccidente.com for a free consultation 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And if the person who suffered the accident wasn't you, but maybe it was your tia, your abuelita, or your second cousin twice removed, don't worry. Everyone at incaseofanaccident.com or encasodeaccidente.com can speak Spanish, hablan español, and they can take text messages on WhatsApp at 888-990-0911. Don't forget to tell them that Veronique Medrano from Accordion to Me sent you. Let's talk a little bit about the project that you're working on right now. So you put together a concept trailer and have a really good idea as to where you want to go.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about how that started, because from what I'm to understand, it started around the time that Netflix happened to be making a Selena show. So tell us a little bit about the project. Take it away.
Absolutely. So Take It Away started 2 years ago when my co-executive producer, co-director, Mirna Perez, who I met through Zoey Saldana. She and I met through Zoey, and we instantly connected, bonded on the same mission-driven type of entrepreneurial spirit, right? So a few years back, Mirna is working with Netflix on the Selena, the series show. One of her jobs on that show was to get in contact with Johnny Canales and his family because he had an appearance on one of the episodes. So she ends up forging this really amazing relationship with Nora Canales, and ultimately ends up getting the life rights signed off so that she can produce original content. Mirna then approaches me, being from the Valley, being a filmmaker, and sort of also just having this kinship with her, and asks, "Hey, do you think that there's something here that we can make as a movie, a show? Is an amazing concept, but Mirna's from Miami, she's Colombian, she maybe didn't have all of the pieces for to make something in the Valley." So we partnered on this project, come to the Valley, spent some time with Johnny and his family, a few weeks doing interviews, shooting, and then another few weeks interviewing a ton of Tejano artists. And then we went back to our respective cities, and for the last year, we've been making a deck. We cut a trailer. We've shown this in LA. We've sent it to just about every company that you can ever imagine.
And it's still going. It's still going. And there's a lot of companies interested. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of people interested.
We have great momentum.
Yeah. And with that in mind, you know, I love the fact that like I found out about it because I am super great friends with Charlie Vela. Like me and him are we are two boats floating in the same direction, just different paths, like different overall stuff that we do, but we're floating in the same direction. And I saw this random photo, and he goes, "Oh yeah, I'm filming," and then he's put up a photo, and I'm like, that is such an odd set. And that was my first thought.
What photo was it?
It was the photo, that first part of the trailer where it shows like it's this set and it's really old timey. Like it looks like a set from the 70s. Like there's a bunch of stuff all over the wall, like tapes and
it's Johnny's old studio.
Yeah, and so like that's what I saw. So I see this, but I have no context because it doesn't have Johnny's name. It doesn't have anything on it. He's just like, "Oh, this is where I'm at." Like I'm like,
I see.
Yeah, and I'm like
in the barn.
Yeah, and I'm like, "Oh, okay." Like that's weird. Is he making a horror movie? I don't know what the hell he's doing. Because it was like semi lit, and I'm like, "Oh, interesting." And then continue on a few months later, and you guys are obviously putting something together, and then you put it out, and I immediately was like, "Thank God," because literally in my mind, after seeing this like great influx of interest, Johnny Canales, for those of you who don't know what happened around the time that the show was coming out, a few things were trending. Bronzeville Mountains was one of them. There are no mountains here. Let me just be super clear. I'm gonna harp on this till there are some mountains. So there's the Brownsville Mountains that went viral. My tweets went viral over just me poking fun at the Brownsville Mountains. I mean, if anyone does it, it has to be me. And then the other thing that went that started trending was Johnny Canales himself, and people were trying to figure out who he was, and like they did such a great job casting him because it was a very like enigmatic person that fit the energy that Johnny brought to the show. And then of course Laura Canales and Shelly Lares. So there was a lot of stuff trending around December when the show came out. So this would be December 2020. And so to follow that up and have you guys put this out, I was like, oh my God, thank God. Like this is such a big moment, like capitalizing on the momentum. I hope somebody does.
And it is.
And it's like, and then just to even be like slightly like in it, very small, but in it, I'm like, yo, what's going on?
Yeah, and that's how we met. I remember you sent me, or I think you sent me a message on Instagram. I did.
Yeah, and I also shared the concept trailer because it was so clean. Like I know that sounds like such a weird thing to say, but it was just there's something so. There was so much care. It looks like something that I would go to Sundance to watch. Like that if somebody were gonna go, oh, like pinche little cans, like little leaf, or yo no sé qué la madre que ponen. Like that's what I could see. Like in my head, in my mind, when I saw it playing, it didn't have any of those things. It doesn't have any of those things. Let me be clear, it's not done. But I could see it. Yeah,
exactly. The potential is there. So we have put together, I mean, what you have seen is something that is shoestring budget. It's, Mirna and I, cameras on our shoulders, editing on the weekends. We meet every single Sunday for a few hours. We develop, we talk, we help each other figure out story threads. But our goal is, as always, is to elevate the content that goes out when it's representing Latinos. And for me specifically, I know that the Valley is so politicized and it's used so often by media, videos, podcasts, to paint more often than not a negative picture. Yeah. And there's like three things that everyone talks about, which is like immigration politics. But usually there's like a tinge of negativity around it. People talk a lot about the problems in the Valley when it comes to like the money or the obesity rates or just like all of these. It's just negative all the time.
It's always negative.
And it wasn't until I left McAllen and started going to all these other places, I was like, nobody knows. People in the United States don't know what the fuck the Valley is. Like nobody knows. Everyone's like, oh, I have a friend from McAllen. Oh, isn't that by South Padre? Or like, yeah, Brownsville. Like people don't know border culture, border town, the music, the history. And so what we want to do is we just want to elevate it and make it beautiful. And we want to show people that what we have down here is so unique in America. And also what we do down here impacts everyone. And it really does affect music outside of our own.
Oh, yeah. And not only does it affect music, but it just affects art outside of our own. Like the amount of films and TV that showcases the Valley is always wrong, which is why I make fun of the Brownsville Mountains, because it's literally you're making a ecological mistake like about an area that doesn't have that. It's a flatland. It doesn't have that type of thing. Like all of these little things.
Yeah, it's
not honest. And over time, that dishonesty paints us so much differently than what we are.
Completely.
And you taking this on and doing this, what was some of the things that so far have really just impacted you from looking at the footage, seeing what you're putting together, going further into the future? What are the things that really impact you so far, just on what you've put together?
There's a few. The first I would say is understanding more about where I come from is really interesting, because a lot of my other work usually deals with the story of other people, and this one just happens to deal a little bit of story of like my own upbringing. So understanding myself, my history, and also there's a lot of, I don't want to take this in a weird direction, but there's a lot of forgiveness.
Take it there.
There's a lot of forgiveness of self that comes with understanding things that happen to you through the circumstances that are out of your control. And the Valley, I think there's a lot of times feel like there's not a lot of control because the narrative is not it doesn't come from us, right?
Yeah.
It's a lot of times it's told to us. And so I've learned that, I have the power to tell my own story, and also to tell the story of the people around me, my neighbors, my tias, my uncles. And the other thing that I've loved, and it has nothing to do with the music, it has to do with people like you and like Charlie and like Fidel and like Myrna, and like there's so many people in Texas that are just volunteering to help us make this movie because it just has to be made. But my favorite thing is just coming here, getting energized, and just being around like-minded people that understand the value of what this is.
Hi everybody, this is Veronique, and I am here to give the fans of the Accordion to Me podcast an exclusive look straight from the creative team behind Take It Away, the Johnny Canales documentary. Enjoy.
Como Johnny Canales, no hay dos.
¿Te gusta como te están recibiendo aquí en Corpus Christi? ¡Mira nomás!
When he came on the air in the early 80s, introducing a new kind of music.
Corpus was Cumbia City. It was like a real Tejano Hollywood. That's what we woke up to on Sundays. All over Texas, California and Chicago.
Chicanos, Mexican Americans, new immigrants. They looked like us.
República Mexicana y Centro y Suramérica, donde quiera que estén, amigos.
We had almost like our own Dick Clark.
Si te entrevisto, estos trajes ustedes los hicieron, ¿verdad?
Los pintaron.
Its apex was the arrival of Selena.
It was Johnny Canales who gave her the first shot on television.
Ustedes, aquí está Selena y los Dinos.
Crowds kept getting bigger and bigger.
You saw him grow from like this small show to this huge production.
Thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch this beautiful piece that is currently in production. If you are wanting to take part in the documentary, casting is currently reaching out to folks who have been part of the live tapings from the 90s or early 2000s. If you were part of a live taping during this time, or if you have a special sentimental story to share about the Johnny Canales show, please reach out to us, leave your name and where you're from so that casting can go ahead and reach out to you. Thanks. You don't want the vibes to end? According to me, you're in luck because I'm the advertiser. You hear that? Go listen to my music on your favorite streaming platform by searching Veronique Medrano. The songs that you need to add to your playlist right now are Mezcal Maria featuring Beatriz Gonzalez and my new Spanish Tejano country tune, Que Hueva, that recently won Nashville's Music Row magazine's Discovery Award. Also, if you're wanting to sport some merch, we'll be launching pod and music merch on my website, www.veroniquemedrano.com. New merch will go each month, so hurry while it lasts and get some matching merch for you and your mom. You know, she wants some new swag. Whoop, whoop. This has been your paid ad read. Whoop, whoop. Yeah, we had lunch together, and I just like gave you the biggest hug because it was just like the passion for this area a lot of the times gets hidden by the bitterness of not getting your flowers while you're here doing the work and doing the thing. And I always implore people, like, please look outside of those flowers and look at the forest from the trees and look at the forest and realize that, yeah, not everything is going to be celebrated, unfortunately, but you are being watched by somebody.
Yes.
And I never realized the ways in which my work was impacting other people. So I'm curious, do you know of any instances in which you realized how your work impacted people?
When Loud, the History of Reggaeton came out, and it got just amazing. It got an amazing reception by the New York Times, LA Times, Washington Post, Time Magazine, Rolling Stone. Everyone gave it like unanimous. You know, it was the #1 podcast in the country for months. I realized that like this microphone reaches everyone. And if you do it right, if you take your time, it really makes an impact. And what we were most celebrated for was for making something that was bilingual in English and Spanish at the same time. And that's when I recognized, okay, there are so many people in this country that are not being spoken to the way that they speak. And I realized that we were having an impact at that point. I was like, it's so simple. It's so simple.
It really is.
It's not, you're not reinventing anything. You just have to just
apply it.
Yes. And that was one moment where I realized I'm on the right path here. And it feels really great to be heard and listened to and be seen and celebrate it a little bit, right? That's not why we do it, but that was a pretty good moment.
It's nice to have it when it's there, like just right as it's happening. You're like, yes.
That's cool.
And you know, speaking of like your time and work on Spotify, and you've worked with multiple brands. So let's be clear, multiple streaming brands. You've worked with them. There's a lot of people you've worked with. What is something that's a misconception for the consumer artist to the work that gets done behind the doors, the glass doors of Spotify?
Misconception.
And these streaming, these streaming giants, the misconception of how things are picked, how things are created, and just overall, just how they work.
There's a lot that goes into these gigantic global companies and streaming platforms. They really are global platforms. So I think they move a little slower and faster than people think, right? So for example, a lot of programs are sort of, I don't want to say decided 6 months in advance, a year in advance, but because they're global companies and there's so many moving parts, you really have to have your ducks in a row 2 quarters before you execute something, a quarter before you execute, that's months ahead of time. So if you are an artist who is releasing a single next week and you're hitting up Spotify, or even a month later, some random person at Spotify, it's like, well, most of these things they're already in the works. And also I'm not the person that you need to talk to. It's actually this other person, this other city, this other office who I don't even know, and I don't you look them up on the company directory and 20 names pop up and you're like, it's like,
it's a lot.
Yeah. It's like a company of thousands of people, all over the world. So even inside of these streaming giants, they're hard to navigate because they're huge. There's a lot of internal programs, politics, and competition. They're hyper competitive internally. So that's another portion of it too. There's multiple playlists, there's multiple curators, there's multiple producers, there's directors, and then you have Amazon competing against Apple, competing against Spotify, and
they're all friendly with each other, but they all compete against each other.
Everyone's always competing.
Yeah, everybody.
For sure. And I do say that there is enough to go around, but I would say a misconception is that it's I don't know how to phrase it, but everything has kind of been predetermined, in some ways. And there are ways to stand out and to rise above, and there are definitely breakout artists and hit songs that come out of nowhere. And TikTok is a perfect example of this, right? That's revolutionizing everything because that is not predetermined by any sense of the word. It's so instantaneous.
Yes.
And in that way, I think TikTok is pretty fun. But do you have a misconception maybe that I could clear up in mind?
I've heard a lot about people saying that streamers are just this generation's payola. And that's one of the big, that's one of the big like mythos, like conversations that happens a lot. Like, oh, you know, like somebody gets a billboard on Times Square. Like they're like, oh yeah, like that's just the label, you know, pushing XYZ artist. And
I mean, I don't think that's true. And I say that because I'm, you know, pretty close with a lot of these curators at Amazon or Apple or Spotify, having worked there. I think there's different ways to go about that. I don't think honestly people get paid out like that, but it is a lot about relationship building.
Yeah,
a lot of it, and a lot of it is about
relationships and
networking, label management, and ultimately also the audiences determine a lot of things. Like regional Mexican music right now is at the top of the world, right? You have the Grupo Frontera here from the Valley. You have Peso Pluma, who 5 months ago were on nobody's map, right? Like they didn't exist.
They were on somebody's, just not ours. But well, like they really weren't on the global scale at all.
Right, but now they are, and so now everyone's reshifting super suddenly to get to that market and to help those artists grow, right? And so now there's a wave of regional Mexican artists who are going to receive more love and attention because there are people that are paving the way for them, and there's a tip of the spear there now. Whereas if Grupo Frontera hadn't played Coachella, then maybe some of these artists wouldn't have gotten a little bit of that bite also, you know?
Yeah, so, Peso Pluma, you know, playing with Becky G and you know, all these like just collabs per se. And it's been like a huge thing in the industry, in the music industry, especially like collab. But then it's also like, at what point can we stop collabing and just stand on our own?
Yeah.
And that would be wonderful to see.
I had a friend recently who was talking about how Bad Bunny was like, so like a couple conversations, they were like, oh, Bad Bunny on that Grupo Frontera song was so cool, or they were like, Grupo Frontera on that Bad Bunny song was so cool, and I was like, no.
It's the other way.
It's Bad Bunny is on the Grupo Frontera song. That is their song. He was a guest, and also he got on that song like days before it released. Like it wasn't even on his map, you know. And then
that's
the way
also the same narrative with Peso Pluma and the other gentleman. It was I feel so bad. I don't know this guy's name. I'm so sorry. But the other guy, it was his song. The song that like Ella Baila Sola.
Yes. Yeah, Peso Pluma was the remix.
Yeah, and that's like a thing. And then like, you know, they invited Peso to go play at Jimmy Fallon, but not him, the guy whose song it actually was.
Drama.
And it's like, there's drama and it's awkward. But I understand. It's like, unfortunately, because the shift was so sudden, like it really did. It was quick. I mean, I have always felt in the last few years that it was gonna shift to Mexican regional music. Like it was going there.
Yeah.
I felt like there was something going on and we were seeing it, but like that boom, like literally from one day to the next, and it was really Coachella. It was during the week of Coachella or the weekends of Coachella. And that's when we really saw it explode. But you have to think the reason it exploded is because look at the volume of people that are at Coachella, though that volume of people and then the internet following along. It was a perfect storm of a moment.
I agree.
That like everything was aligned. It's literally like Beyonce when she performed at Coachella, and that was like all the stars aligned for her. That moment, it was a moment that was shifted over. That was what Mexican Regional was experiencing on that Coachella stage.
Absolutely.
Was a Beyonce moment in essence, because it was on everyone's lips. Everyone wanted a piece, and now it's just shifted everything. Now we're in just this age of storytelling that musically, artistically, now they're starting to search and actively be like, let's invest in it.
Yeah, absolutely. And ultimately it's better for all of us too, you know?
Yeah.
Even take it away, you know, this movie about Tejano and norteño and regional Mexican and cumbia and conjunto, it's all in the same world. And regional Mexican wouldn't be where it is without conjunto, norteño, Tejano, Reggaeton wouldn't be where it is without like this wave of immigration and like some of the border politics that happened in the 90s. Puerto Rico is also a part of the United States, and it's impacted. There's so much that goes into these conversations, and people think that it's like overnight. And a lot of what I try to do is kind of
add context.
I kind of ask people to like, hold on, nothing happens overnight. Actually, this has been happening for 40, 50 years, and it just happened to like align this week or in your lifetime. But let me kind of show you how this has been premeditated, not just by the artist, but by the laws that the United States chooses to enact when it comes to immigration, by telecommunication deals and networks absorbing each other, by the way technology shifts and the way Twitter and TikTok affect what's popular. It's not just about like a hit song, it's about generations of musicians who have like paved the way, and the way that our parents brought us here, and even us talking about it helps.
Yeah, it does. And I think a lot about the fact that at this stage in my life, so I'm in my 30s, you're in your 30s, I felt a shift in wanting to be better about representing my culture appropriately and understanding where I'm from. But it didn't happen till the end, like not till the end of my life. My God, I'm being so dramatic. To the end of my 20s. And did you feel that same kind of like shift at the end of your 20s?
I did, yeah. I mean, I was 27 when I first started to really ask myself, like, why am I doing what I'm doing? Because before, when I was in high school, I was like, oh, this is fun. Like, photography's fun, editing is fun. A trip to LA with my my student friends, let's go. Go to college, and it's like everything's new. Go to New York, everything's new. But eventually you get to your later 20s and you're like, okay, maybe things don't feel so new. Do I really want to keep doing this? If I do, why? And also, is it about money? Is it about passion? Is it about success? And yeah, I just had to really realign with why I was doing what I was doing. And it does come back to that.
I think that is such a beautiful sentiment when we ask, like, why? Mm-hmm. Why am I doing what I'm doing? Why am I going down this path? And so to finally wrap it up, I always ask every guest this is, we've touched on so much, and yet I'd love to know that at this stage of your life, what is life accordion to you?
What is life accordion to me? Right now, I'm in an entrepreneurial part of my life where I'm sort of trying to take more onus on the opportunities that I create for others. And I'm also looking for new ways to speak to audiences, and I want to experience new things too. So I've made films, I've made podcasts, but according to me, my future looks a lot more, how would I say this, diversified. Mm-hmm. So now I'm also getting into different forms of art practice, and it goes back to the why. I used to feel like I'm a filmmaker because that's what I went to college to learn, mm-hmm. and that's what Spotify hired me to do. I don't work for Spotify anymore. I'm not in college anymore. I can live wherever I want to live, right? I can make whatever I want to make. And I feel that's so freeing. And it really did take me getting past my 20s into my 30s to understand, like, okay, art and voice and honesty can be represented so many ways. Mm. So now I'm focusing a lot on fashion. I have like a men's fashion line that I'm developing, and I'm trying to get my first collection out there because
I'm so excited. I cannot wait to go to the show. I'm already saying I'm going.
You will be there.
I cannot wait. I'll be like sitting in the front row. I'm like, I'm not a dude, but I'm so excited.
Yeah. So now I'm focusing like on it's, to me, that's still a visual experience. It's a practice, right? Mm-hmm. Of texture and color and like tone and feel and all of that. And it helps you connect with people. I have TV shows that I'm developing and selling, which is also new to me, right? And so I have a few shows that I've already started to put out there, and hopefully, I'll get my first show sold soon. I have this feature film, Take It Away. It's my first feature-length film, and all of these things are firsts for me. And but I don't think I would have been able to have all of these experiences had I not, have gone through a lot of failures and trials and tribulations. So yeah, I'm just trying to live a more entrepreneurial life now, and see where that takes me.
Well, Thank you so much for just sharing with us today while you're here in the Valley, going through memory lane, obviously nearby, and just kind of taking it all in. And as always, thank you guys so much for coming on to the Accordion to Me podcast. And as always, puro amor, puro besos, puro Tejano. Mwah. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Accordion to Me. The team behind this week's episode includes mixing and editing by Juan Pablo Diaz, theme music by Rodrigo Montalvo, produced by Javi G from MD Media. In-person recordings were done at the Podify Studios and remotely through Riverside FM. Accordion to Me is distributed through Anchor, and you can stream Accordion to Me wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. I'm your host and executive producer, Veronique Medrano. Puro amor, puro besos, puro Tex-Mex.